and welcome. Welcome to the TCDD Legislative Halftime Update. My name is Scott Daigle, and I am the Public Policy Director for the Texas Council for Developmental Disabilities. We are so excited to have you here today. We are going to get started because we have just 1 hour to talk about what's going on at the Capitol, and there's a lot to talk about. So, um, so let me do a quick well, actually, before I jump into the overview, let me just do some quick housekeeping notes. First off, as you may have just heard, this webinar is being recorded. So just be prepared for that. And we hope to share a link to the recording in a follow-up email that we will send out to all registrants of the event. There is also live captioning available for the webinar. So you can go to an external link for the captioning, which I am putting into the chat right here, or you can just go to the captioning through Zoom, which is the same captioner, just through Zoom rather than the external link. So you can sign up for either of those. And then also, in terms of questions, as we move through the presentation today, we have the Q&A set up. So if you could feel free to enter your questions into the Q&A, and we will try and answer them as we move along through the presentation, through the Q&A function on Zoom. And then we will also, if there are any questions that you didn't get to at the end, we will try and reserve some time at the end of the presentation to answer any remaining questions that people may have, or to answer anything that might be easier to answer verbally and on camera rather than through the, I guess, the Q&A function. So with that, let's start with the overview. So first off, we are going to start with an introduction to TCDD. I'll keep it very brief. Then we will move to the main feature of the presentation, which is the legislative update, what is going on at the Capitol. And I should mention, obviously, this is called the Legislative Halftime Update. Today is the 70th day of the 140-day Texas regular session of the legislature. So we are right at the halfway mark here, and we thought that this would be a good time to just kind of check and see what's going on and provide a quick update on that. After we go through the legislative update, we will move to a quick discussion on some resources that TCDD offers, and then we will wrap it up with the Q&A. So, before we move to the intro to TCDD, or we will start the intro to TCDD with an overview of the TCDD policy team members that you will hear from today. Again, I am Scott Daigle, the Public Policy Director for TCDD. We'll also have Linda Logan, a Senior Policy Analyst for the agency, Lauren Gerken, another Senior Policy Analyst for the agency, and then our newest addition to the TCDD policy team, Marissa Einacone. And she is a policy analyst for the agency as well. So that is who you will be seeing and hearing from today. And now let's move into who TCDD is and what do we do. So TCDD is a federally funded state agency, and the council's purpose in law is to encourage policy change so that people with disabilities have opportunities to be fully included in their communities and exercise control over their own lives. The council is comprised of 27 governor-appointed members, and at least 60% of those members are adults with developmental disabilities or family members of people with developmental disabilities. And there is a federal mandate that one individual on the council must live in or must have lived in an institution in the past or be a family member of such a person. The council is also comprised, excuse me, of a of representatives of a number of Texas state agencies, including the Health and Human Services Commission, the Department of State Health Services, the Texas Workforce Commission, and Texas Education Agency. We have a representative from Disability Rights Texas, which is our state's protection and advocacy system. And then we have representatives from two universities, University of Texas and Texas A&M. What do? We inform by hosting events like this, trying to inform the public about what is going on in disability policy and what efforts that can be made for you to get more involved in crafting disability policy, making change across the state for people with disabilities. We evaluate and build. Part of what we do, a large part of what we do, is by funding innovative projects to make Texas better for people with disabilities. And then we also connect. We work with a variety of other groups trying to evoke change across the state. And then we try to influence by providing commentary to state agencies, to lawmakers in the legislative process, trying to make policy better at the state level and at the local level sometimes. So let's move into the legislative update and what's been happening at the Capitol. And our first speaker today, aside from me, will be Lauren Gerken. And I just saw her camera come on, so I will drop off.
Hello, everyone. I apologize in advance. I'm looking at two screens, one with y'all and one with all of my notes. And so no one's going to be looking back and forth. So the first topic that we're going to cover today is inclusive child care. We have two bills relating to child care. One with a companion bill and then the Senate. So the first one is HB 174 by Gonzalez, and the companion bill is Senate Bill 2071. And this bill is looking at improving child care licensing regulations for registered child care facilities and family homes. Just to ensure that the minimum child care licensing standards are aligned with the Americans with Disabilities Act. They work hand in hand together. So what we have been working on is bringing federal language down and then state language, since child care funders are typically looking at the minimum licensing standard language more frequently than they look at federal language. The House bill has been referred to the Human Services Committee and is awaiting a hearing, and we'll keep you updated on that. And then the Senate hearing is filed and waiting on a referral. So the House bill is a little bit further along than the Senate bill right now. And then we have the one right after that, so it can get a little confusing sometimes, but we also have HB 175 by Representative Gonzalez. This is looking at establishing optional certifications for child care providers within the Texas Writing Star program and additional reimbursements that are attached to those certifications. And one of the certifications that the rep has included as a must-have for those optional certifications is enhanced inclusion techniques for child care providers, making their centers accessible for kids with disabilities. This bill has been referred to the Committee on Trade, Workforce, and Economic Development, because it is looking at enhancing the workforce through additional reimbursement rates and the TIS program. Next slide, please. The next that I'm gonna look at is bills that relate to individualized education programs, or IEP. We have a couple bills related to this. So we have HB 1188 by Rep. Manual, and we have the companion bill to that, which is Senate Bill 1092 by Senator Zachary. These bills are referred to the Public Committee in the House and the Education K-12 Committee in the Senate, and they are both awaiting hearings right now. So we're tracking those to see when a hearing may come up. But these bills are related to making sure that kids are getting referrals through the local IDD authority for public services and benefits. So the goal is to smooth transition, from education and adulthood by navigating public benefits out in adulthood. The next Senate bill that we're looking at is also by Senator Zachary. And those who have been in that field for a while are probably not surprised that she's been quite busy with our community. And Senate Bill 57, which is going to provide just to make sure that plans for public safety for students with disabilities and any impairments are really thought out and protected during any school drill, disasters, or emergency situation. So making sure that there is a plan for those students and that they're not left behind or put in any danger, and that the schools know exactly how to support them in that situation. This is actually a bipartisan bill with a co-author of Rep. Campbell, and it is on the move and it's moving pretty quick. So it has already passed the third reading in the Senate with a vote of 29 yeas and 0 nays. So it should be coming over to the House pretty soon. Next slide, please. The next set is for post-secondary opportunities. These are all refiled bills from last session. So I know it's a little bit confusing because they have two House bills up there, but they're duplicates, and this happens sometimes. So we have HB 2081 by Rep. Busey and HB 29 and 17 by Rep. Gonzalez. And these bills, in the Senate campaign by Senator Menendez, aims to create a building better futures program to support educational opportunities for training and occupational skills for services with IDD in public and private institutions in higher education. So broadening those opportunities that students can engage in to prepare them for careers as they transition into adulthood. And both of the House bills have been referred to the Higher Education Committee and are waiting on a hearing. The Senate bill is also waiting on a hearing, and it has been referred to the Education K through 16 committee. So we are watching those for hearings as well. The next bill and Senate bill also by Senator Menendez relating to create a scholarship program for students in certain public higher education opportunities. So this would expand the funding support for students with disabilities in programs like inclusive post-secondary education programs, as there is not a general scholarship program in place for those individuals, and those programs can be quite expensive. So they are looking to create some funding support for those individuals. This has also been improved the education, changes in scene, and is also waiting on a hearing. Next slide, please. The next couple, we're about to break the trend of waiting on a hearing here. Is House Bill 3494 by Rep. Hernandez. This bill has been following federal trends and conversations about phasing out the practice of supplemental wage to 14C certificates. There have been a couple conversations happening at the federal level over the last few months, and so this bill is echoing those moves, and it will phase out supplemental 14C certificates by 2030. So it's got about 5 years to do that. This bill has been filed, is waiting on a vote to a committee. So we will see where that goes. It will probably go to Trade, Workforce, and Economic Development Committee, and we're watching that. The next bill is on the move this week. It is House Bill 1147 by Representative Gama. This is looking at establishing a workforce soft skills training pilot program. This is a refile from last session. TCDD testified on this bill, and it is not a disability specific bill, but we recognize that in soft skills training is something that would support people with disabilities. This is getting heard tomorrow in Trade, Workforce, and Economic Development Subcommittee on Workforce at 8 a.m. tomorrow in E2012. So E212. Next slide. The next bill, I know that we're voting because like Scott and said, we have a lot to get through. Is HB 1941 by Representative Campbell. This is a refile relating to establishing peer support services for people with IDD in Medicaid program. So Medicaid waivers. This is a refile, like we said, just working on recognizing those peer support services and the benefits and the employment opportunities around them within Medicaid programs. This has been referred to the House Human Services Committee and is awaiting on a hearing. It did pass the Human Services Committee last session, but it just kind of ran out of time after that. So we'll see how it moves. All right. Next slide, please. All right. And that's the topic, it brings in a couple areas, but we'll call it strategic planning. Because the both bills look at strategic plan development and coordination. So first is HB 2807 by Rep. Tony Rose. With a companion bill, and then Senate Bill 2896 by Senator Cook. This is relating to establishing IDD coordinating council. So getting multiple groups and stakeholders together to look at how we can improve services and service delivery here in Texas and really optimize the opportunities that people with IPD have to live strong, independent lives. This is also scheduled for hearing tomorrow at 8 a.m. So this is going to be in Human Services at 8 a.m. in room E2-030. So I won't be there to testify on 2 bills tomorrow. So if you need support, let us know. We'll be there. The next bill is House Bill 2310 by Rep. Dodds. This is a bill that has come out of our inclusive childcare work group that we've had and the Texas Cares for Children. So this is related to developing a strategic plan to improve early learning opportunities for children with disabilities, looking across childcare, working with the Texas Education Agency, Housing and Human Services Commission, Texas Workforce Commission, different representatives from different groups to try and improve the overall system for kids with disabilities. Next slide, please. Oh, and sorry, HB 2310 has been referred to the Public Education Committee. It has not gotten a hearing yet. And then last topic that I wanted to cover is disability history. So these two bills are companion bills, so HB 3048 by Rep. Allen and Senate Bill 2612 by Senator Royce West. These are bills trying to establish disability history curriculum in Texas school and their social studies. Really looking at the fact that Texas has played a huge role in disability history and kids need to benefit from learning about that history. Both and the also has been referred to public education committee and is waiting a hearing, and Senate bill has only been filed, so we're waiting for that referral and watching and see where it goes. And that is my time. I'm going to see if you have any questions about any of these bills or any of the hearings tomorrow. Please reach out and let me know, and we will work with you on providing testimony. Thank you.
Thank you, Lauren. Our next presenter will be Marissa. Marissa, if you want to come on camera, I will move to the next slide here and take it away.
Hi, everyone. So I'm going to be speaking on public education and SPED finance. So both House Bill 2 and Senate Bill 568 are finance bills. Senate Bill 568 specifically aims to reform special education funding by transitioning from a placement-based system to a service intensity model. So currently, student funding is based off of something called a PEAMS code. It codes their percentage of time in special education versus general education. But as we all know, special ed is not a physical location, it is a set of services. So this shift in funding has been recommended by the community as well as the Texas Commission on Special Education Funding. House Bill 2 addresses public education and school finance as a whole, and it proposes increasing the basic allotment, which determines per student funding, thereby potentially providing more resources for all students, including those with developmental disabilities. The key differences here is that Senate Bill 568 changes how we fund special education, and House Bill 2 is an overarching public education funding, making key increases to the basic allotment. And while there are differences, different opinions on the best way to increase school funding, everybody agrees that we need to increase our school funding and reconsider how we fund special education. Then the next two bills I'm going to speak about are SB2 and HB3, which are school voucher bills. They both propose ESAs, which are education savings accounts, to provide state funds for private school tuition. SB 2 would offer $10,000 per student and has passed the Senate, so it is moving to the House for consideration. HB 3 includes a similar ESA program, but with different funding mechanisms and eligibility requirements. HB 2 had a 23-hour hearing 2 weeks ago, and there was an overwhelming percentage of testimony opposing the bill, and it remains in committee without a vote. Both bills represent a shift in education funding policy, raising questions about their potential impact on public school resources, accountability measures, and access to services for students with disabilities. And TCDD has distributed a document to lawmakers with recommendations for addressing some of those concerns. And lastly, I'm going to be speaking on HB 6, which was heard last week in the Public Education House Committee. And it would give school districts more flexibility in using in-school suspension, out-of-school suspension, and other disciplinary measures. During its committee hearing last Tuesday, testimony continued late into the night with strong support from school districts, teachers unions, educators, and parents. Primarily those, though, with students in general education. TCDD and many other disability advocacy groups have raised serious concerns about the bill's potential impact on students with disabilities, fearing it will weaken key safeguards and increase the risk of excessive punishment and exclusion of our most vulnerable students. These organizations have submitted recommendations to the bill author and the committee to address their concerns and are awaiting updates to see if suggestions will be incorporated into the revisions of the new version. HB 6 is also still left pending in committee, and the bill's author has stated that he wants unanimous committee support and is open to revising the language based on public feedback. And that's all I have for you guys today. If you have any questions, please drop them in the Q&A.
Thank you, Marissa. And next up will be Linda Logan. And Linda,
Audio.
there we go.
Okay, hi.
All right.
Yeah. Glad y'all could make it. The first bill I'm going to talk about is Senate Bill 5 / House Bill 5, which is the research bill that has a fiscal note of $3 billion. I'm not kidding. And the main issue in this bill relates to consent. You'll see it listed. The bills I'm talking about are the two at the top. I don't think the other three listed on the slide have moved, but these have moved, but this one has moved really fast. In fact, it was engrossed in the Senate and received in the House on March 6th. And the main objections that I've heard have been offered by individuals who say things like, oh, I don't think it's the role of government to support research, whatever. But the main objections are that because this is focusing on dementia, which is generally associated with older people, that what you have is a situation in which people who do have dementia and do not have the ability to give consent have to be consented for. And so what form should that take, and how can we be sure that we're not consenting to treatments like ECT that the person wouldn't actually consent to if they were competent. So it'll be interesting to watch, but it's not showing any signs of slowing down. And so if you want to get your thoughts in, time is of the essence. I guess that's really at this stage all I have to say about this particular set of bills. Next slide, please. Thank you. Jail diversion. Okay. This is a bill that has been sent forward to the House Homeland Security, Public Safety, and Veterans Affairs Committee for a hearing. It collects specific data surrounding the arrest of people that have intellectual and developmental disabilities or mental illness. And part of the reason for collecting the data is to determine what can be associated with a good outcome and what is associated with a bad outcome in the steps along the way. So it was referred on 3/11, and I think that it's a good idea. And the next slide, please. Capital punishment. Every session we have bills outlawing capital punishment of people with developmental and intellectual disabilities. And this is seems like it's a bigger bill than it is usually. The fact that every year we come back asking to bar capital punishment of people with developmental and intellectual disabilities whose behavior is conditioned by those disabilities suggests that hopefully this time we'll be able to break through, but I don't really know. It was the House version was referred to the House Criminal Jurisprudence Committee on 3/4, and the Senate version was actually referred to Criminal Justice on February 3rd. So seems like they ought to be rolling forward to have a hearing hopefully soon. And that's what I've got for you today. Thank you, Scott.
Thank you, Linda. And I will just note regarding those capital punishment bills, those bills are filed in response to a Supreme Court ruling from a few years back, which basically said that people with intellectual disabilities should not be eligible for capital punishment. And the state of Texas was essentially required to, well, all states were essentially required to put in place a process whereby intellectual disability could be determined for people up on trial. And this would put that process into place. Texas is lagging behind other states in setting up this process, which again is why this bill is filed every session. And we'll see if it gets through this time.
Well, it sounds like the first trial is the trial about whether the person has an intellectual disability. And unless the jury is not unanimous, it doesn't count.
Yes, yes. There is a further process that goes along with it. Excellent. All right, thank you, Linda. So I do have a few other bills that I wanted to quickly bring your attention to before we move on to any additional questions. And again, feel free to put those questions into the Q&A. We have already answered a few of them. So check that out and see if the question you have has already been answered. But first off, I will start with a few additional education bills. First off, we have House Bill 2292 by Representative Alma Allen, and this relates to early pickups in our public schools. There's been a rash in recent years of parents bringing their child to school. The child is there for a little bit, but then suddenly the parent gets a call from the school saying, "Hey, you need to come pick up your child and take them home." And suddenly the parent is having to leave work, go pick up the student, bring it home, and then figure out what to do the rest of the day. in some instances, this has been happening so much that parents are having to quit their jobs to deal with this frequency. And then the other issue is that these early pickups, which are basically seen as undocumented suspensions, they're not being recorded properly. There is a recording process or reporting process that you have to use in relation to these types of things. So it's become a serious problem, and Representative Allen has been working on this for a few sessions. So we will see if it gets through this session, and that has been referred to the Public Education Committee. We also have a bill both in the House and the Senate, SB 154 by Senator Jose Menendez and HB 1011 by Representative Ann Johnson, which would establish required screenings for pediatric feeding disorder for students. And basically, this would provide screenings it would require screenings for such disorder if seen as necessary, and then it would also require steps to be placed into the IEP to have a plan for dealing with that over the course of the student's day. So that bill, in both instances, has been referred to committee, but it has not yet gotten a hearing. So we'll see if it gets one of those soon. We have House Bill 2219 by Representative Ana Hernandez, and this is relating to the eligibility of a student with fetal alcohol spectrum disorder for special education services provided by a public school. So we had a meeting or a roundtable discussion a few months ago where individuals were talking about the issues they were having getting their students with FASD into special education programs, because apparently you needed to have FASD in and of itself did not qualify a student for special education. The student needed to have other diagnoses that would then qualify it. So based on that discussion, Representative Fernandez had a member of her office who heard that discussion and thought that it was something that needed to be addressed. So they have filed House Bill 2219 to kind of address that issue in the schools. So that has been referred to the Public Education Committee as well and has not yet had a hearing, but we will see. We are watching out for it. Another couple of bills that were just filed recently, SB 2326 by Senator Judith Zaffirini and House Bill 4754 by Representative Ray Lopez, would require universal changing facilities in public buildings and places of public accommodation. Now, this would apply for buildings that were built after a certain period of time, and there are cost requirements baked into the mandate for that. But essentially, this would require adult changing stations in public buildings and make it much easier for families to go out in public. Obviously, there is an issue where adults will go out and they do not have a place to change. They are forced to lie down on a bathroom floor or something in order to address that issue. And I don't think anybody likes laying down on a bathroom floor. I think it's safe to say. So this is meant to address that. And there is kind of a nationwide effort to kind of get this going. And Texas is the latest state that has filed legislation to try and address this issue. So we look forward to that. Both of these bills were filed in the last days before the filing deadline. So as of yet, neither has been referred to committee, but we will be watching closely for those bills. Lastly, before we move on to talking about TCDD resources, I didn't want to end the discussion without talking about the issue of attendant wages, because it is very much the top priority for a number of disability organizations across the state. It's something that disability advocates have been trying to chip away at for a number of sessions now. And last session, we saw the minimum, or we saw the base rate for community attendance raise up to $10.60 an hour from, I believe it was $8.11 an hour in the prior to that last session. But advocates felt that that still was not enough. They were, last session, they were asking for a minimum of $15, hoping for more. And then what they got was, what the legislature decided to fund was $10.60 an hour. So advocates have come back to the legislature. They're saying, we appreciate the additional funding that you put in last session, but it is still not enough. We're still having trouble hiring people for these positions, retaining people in these positions, particularly when they can leave being a community attendant and go work at Buc-ee's or Whataburger, making, sometimes $17 an hour or even more. So they are back. There have been a couple of standalone bills that have been filed that would increase the base rate for community attendance, generally to $15, sometimes a little more. But I think everybody is in agreement that the final decision on this is going to be made in the general appropriations bill, which at the end of the day will be Senate Bill 1. So the Senate has already they've already passed their version of the appropriations bill out of committee, and it is set to come up for a vote on the Senate floor in the near future. And the rate that they have passed out of committee is increasing it from $10.60 an hour to $12.44 an hour. Whereas the House has put in a little bit more. They have put in the rate that they are looking at is $14.28 an hour for most community attendants, but then they also have an additional increase for certain attendants that work in group homes or intermediate care facilities or other settings. So that is what is currently being considered in the House committee. That has not yet passed out of House committee and moved on. But then at the end of the day, both the House and the Senate will look at those changes, look at which each of them decided, and then try and have a come to an agreement on that. I see Lauren has raised her hand. Yes, Lauren.
Hey there. And since we got a question in the chat from Angie about the scholarship program in Senate Bill 186. I'm gonna answer that as concisely and effectively as possible. So when it's referring to people with certain disabilities, the bill has it as language that the higher education board will look at things like a disability affidavit and kind of set parameters for what eligibility will look like in this program. So we don't have specific nailed down certain disabilities, what that will look like. I can tell you that it has language referring to initial eligibility requirements, which there is quite a long list, but generally it's, they had to be resident in the state, as determined by the coordinating board rule. They had to be enrolled in an associate or baccalaureate program or a certified program at an institution of higher education. So either they're getting an associate's degree or a bachelor's degree, or they're in a certified MC program. They had to be enrolled as a student for at least 1/4 of a full course, to be eligible, they had to have applied for available financial aid. They had to comply with any additional non-academic or non-financial requirements adopted by the coordinating board. So there are some requirements laid out in the bill about who they're talking about. The other requirements will be installed by the higher education coordinating board. So generally, they're not speaking about like if you have autism, you'll get it, but if you have Down syndrome, you won't. That is not what that means. What it means is, if the bill passes, the higher education coordinating board will have to work on setting more specific guidelines for who is eligible. It also means that you won't be eligible for a scholarship simply because you are a person with a disability. You'll have to meet these other initial eligibility requirements. I hope that answered your question, Angie.
Thank you, Lauren. There was a question in the Q&A regarding the attendant rate, and I believe that I answered that live. So if there is additional information that you need on that, please put that in the Q&A again. We have a question regarding House Bill 1136 and Senate Bill 2397. So I will start with 2397, which is a bill by Senator Charles Perry that would establish a task force on disability policy. And this basically looks to me like a similar effort to what we talked about with the IDD Coordinating Committee, except that this would establish a task force to look at disability across the disability spectrum. So not just IDD, but yeah, the full spectrum of disability. And then this would help to establish a 10-year strategic plan for disability policy in the state. So it looks like it is kind of a similar but broader effort to what we talked about with the IDD Coordinating Committee bill, which was 2807. House Bill 1136 is a bill by Representative Aaron Gomez, and this would conduct a study on parking for people with disabilities. And this is a bill that actually just got a hearing last week. I have not watched the hearing yet, unfortunately. But I can tell you that there are a number of parking privileges that are offered for veterans with disabilities. And this came out of a bill last session that had been initially filed kind of looking at those parking privileges. But over the course of discussion with the Governor's Committee on People with Disabilities, with us and a few other groups, the representative expanded it to kind of look at parking across across the board. So that is what this bill is kind of taking on. I can follow up with you, Laura Taylor, and provide you more information on that as I have it available, if that is okay. We have about 12 minutes left. So if anybody has any additional questions, please put them into the Q&A and we will try and answer them before the end of the discussion. And while we're doing that, while we're waiting on some more questions, I will just talk about some TCDD resources that we have. First off, I want to mention that the council, in preparation for the legislative session, approved a list of public policy priorities that they wanted to advance over the course of the session. And they are listed here. So there were 7 priorities, and they are personal and civil rights, accessibility, early childhood and inclusive education, health and safety, employment, attendant wages and training, and funding for services. Some of you may recall that we did have a series of public policy priority roundtables where we took feedback from people across the state on these policy priorities. So we heard stories from people about how their families, how they were being impacted by issues that are related to these priorities. And we have taken those issues and kind of used them to inform our work looking at what is being filed at the Capitol and providing commentary. So yes, so we have that, and these policy priorities are fairly broad. There's a lot that goes into them, but this is just a general guideline for the work that TCDD is doing throughout the session. I also want to mention a number of resources that we offer throughout the legislative session. First off, we have the Texas Legislative News, and that is something that comes out every Tuesday, posted on our website. And also, if you are on our mailing list, you get that distributed to your email every Tuesday. And this is a general update of what's happening at the legislature over the past week and the coming week. So we provide information on what's been happening, some of the work that TCDD has been doing. We provide information like general explainers on legislative processes. I can't talk today. We also provide information on upcoming events that are being hosted by TCDD or by other disability-related organizations. We also provide information on some upcoming hearings. So we have a feature called 5 Hearings to Watch for the upcoming week, and we will provide a list of 5 hearings that have bills related to disability issues that are being heard. And if you want to provide, if you want to go down to the Capitol and provide testimony on them, they're coming up. Or in the case of House bills that are getting hearings, you can actually provide public comment through an online portal that the House offers. So we try and keep people informed on that. And then for most of the session, we were updating on what disability-related bills were being filed. We've just passed the filing deadline 10 days ago. So we are still kind of catching up for the remaining bills that were being filed. So I think tomorrow may be the last legislative news where we have a list of bills that were recently filed during the session. We've also got the TCDD Bill of the Week, and this comes out at the end of the day every Friday, generally, where we do a deep dive on a particular piece of disability-related legislation. We talk about what the bill does. We provide background information on why it is seen as necessary or why it was filed in the first place. We provide a quote from the bill author on why they think it's important. We provide updates on where it is in the process and maybe some notes, some testimony from people who support the bill, who oppose the bill, if anybody, and then other general notes about it. We also produce a one-pager on each one of the bills of the week that is kind of a concise description of what the bill does, and you can share that with your network, you can share it with your lawmaker, you can just keep it to yourself to help keep you better informed on what's going on. So we have done, I believe we've done 9 bills of the week so far, and we have produced 9 one-pagers, which can be distributed. And some of those bills have already gotten hearings, or at least one of them is getting a hearing tomorrow, the IDD Coordinating Committee bill. We also have a very active social media imprint from our comms team. So be sure to follow us on all of the platforms. We're on Facebook, Instagram, X, and LinkedIn. So you can follow us on any of those platforms to find out what is going on. We have a My Testimony Blueprint, which is something that is, it's basically a way to help people provide testimony. We give you kind of the bare bones sketch of what is necessary for testimony in general, and then you plug in all of the personal information that you want to put in there. So it just makes it that much easier for people to get involved in the process of providing testimony. We have videos on YouTube that kind of have explainers about the legislative process and other things. You can check that out. On the TCDD policy page, we also have materials like that, such as how a bill becomes a law and other aspects of the legislative process that you can check out. And we are also doing something right now over the course of the session called TCDD Office Hours at the Capitol, where you can sign up for a 30-minute window. We're doing it every Wednesday, every other Wednesday at the Capitol from 1 to 3 p.m. You can sign up for a 30-minute window to talk with TCDD policy staff. We can answer questions. We can help you firm up some testimony that you want to do. We can help you work on a personal elevator pitch. We can go to an office visit with you if you want to visit your lawmaker, and we can just be there to help provide support for you. So you can sign up for that. We have links for that on the legislative news that we send out every week. And yeah, so be on the lookout for it. With that, let me see if there are some other questions that need to be answered. And I will stop sharing my window right here. So let's see, we've got, So I think that there is a question from Lee Dunson regarding federal legislation that I am not necessarily familiar with. So that's something that we would need to follow up with you, Lee, about HR 6408 and I guess Senate Resolution 4136, if I'm not mistaken. So we can check into that and follow up with you. There is an anonymous attendee who asks, can TCDD share which representatives are on the fence with HB 3? I would like to advocate no on vouchers. Did that just get answered? It just disappeared from my
I just answered it.
screen. Oh, you did. Okay. Okay. All right. So we've got that. If there are any other last questions that you want to ask, we still have a couple minutes left. Or if members of the policy team want to jump in and share any last thoughts that they might have before the end of the session, you can feel free to do that as well. There is a question of, will there be a slideshow after? We will be sending out the slideshow in some follow-up materials. We'll send out an email, which I believe will include the slideshow. It should include a link to this presentation. And there's also at least one Bill of the Week document that I promised to send out relating to the IDD Coordinating Committee bill that explained the differences between TCDD and the Governor's Committee on People with Disabilities and the newly proposed IDD Coordinating Committee. So we will send that out within the next day or two. Any other questions in this last 2 minutes?
Yeah, I just dropped the link to that one pager in the chat.
Oh, thank you very much,
Yeah.
Lauren. And I will, just while we're talking, I will mention, or I did mention that the bill filing deadline passed on the 60th day of the legislative session. So 10 days ago, which basically means that for the most part, with some very rare exceptions, just about every bill that we are going to see filed has already been filed. So we know what the landscape looks like this session in terms of legislation. We know what's out there and what's going to be considered. And there was actually I believe, a new record set for the number of bills that have been filed by the Texas Legislature. A new record was set last session where they had filed just over 8,000 bills. And this session, they filed, I believe the number was around 8,700. So about 600, about 600 more bills have been filed this session over last session. We don't know, since it is still a limited period of time, only 140 days to consider this. We don't know if filing more bills equates to more bills being passed. So we will see as we approach the session or the end of the session. All right. And someone pointed out that this session, it was 9,000 bills that have been filed. So yes, that is quite a lot. That is quite a lot. All right. And it is 2 o'clock. So we are at the 1 hour mark. So we're going to wrap up our legislative halftime update. Again, I appreciate you all tuning in. And please don't hesitate to reach out if you have any questions as we move through the rest of the legislative session. And we hope to see you at the Capitol. Have a good day. Thank you.